Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of TBR. And I'm George Binns. And this evening I want to talk a little bit about the repurposing of Briscoe. And to help us understand it, we have the architect in charge, Thaddeus Siemasko. Welcome, Thad.
Well, I'm glad to be here, George. It's fun to talk about this project.
So basically, we're starting with a building that used to be the high school, and then it used to be the junior high school, then it used to be the middle school. So it's got a long history, and all of a sudden it's now going to become the Beverly Village for Living and the Arts.
That's correct.
And according to the paperwork, it says they're going to provide space for artists, elderly housing, and the best thing of all, you're going to save the auditorium. How are you going to do this?
With some difficulty, but in
a lot of money too,
with a lot of money and with a really great team of people. The school started it's almost literally 100 years following the track. 1923 to 1925 they built it, which is pretty much what we're following with the reconstruction. And then occupied for almost 100 years, as you mentioned, as the different types of city educational areas. The building, we found, of course, had been well worn, but really well built. Yep. Back 100 years ago, the city really invested in a high quality construction, and so that really helped with the reconstruction.
It's reading up some of the background on it. There's a lot of emphasis on preserving the architecture, preserving the character of the building. And one of the things that surprised me is you're going to save the windows, and yet you're putting in new windows right now. I drove by it this morning.
Yes.
What are they 6 over 6 or?
They're like 14 over 14. They're enormous windows, as you'd expect. But, for a school building, daylight was considered is still and was considered really important for learning, and so they are all being completely replaced. But we have to follow the Department of Interior guidelines for historic restoration, and that gets all reviewed by the Mass Historical Commission. And you literally take the profile of the window, the exact profile, how the glass is divided, the outside frame, and have it remanufactured to follow that exact profile and get that profile approved. So they will be identical to the profile, the look and feel of the windows that were originally put in the building.
Well, how do you make them energy efficient doing that?
Well, they will have, in fact, insulated glass and the thermal breaks and so forth. That's part of the program.
That stuff gets built into it, even though it looks like an old window.
Exactly. So that makes it a little bit more challenging, of course. And with that comes extra weight, and with the building being used mostly by seniors, lifting up those big heavy windows can be an issue. So we did some research and got the most efficient spring-loaded hoist we can to help make the windows less
heavy. So it's still going to be double-hung windows.
Same window. We are providing fresh air to the units mechanically as well, so you don't necessarily have to open the window, but the windows would operate, yes.
Yeah. So what else do you have to do to a building of that nature, that time frame, to bring it up to current code and make it something that the seniors can live in and the artists can use?
Well, quite a lot. The biggest thing was the building systems, the heating, ventilating, air conditioning, electrical, and plumbing. The actual structure itself is fine. It can hold the loads, if you will, but it was not designed for seismic loads. And we're in an earthquake zone, and we had to reinforce the masonry walls by code as part of the project. But the structural part was less difficult. The harder part was putting in mechanical equipment in a building where you're also trying to preserve every surface, interior surface. Yeah. The trim, the locker, the hallways, all those doors, all that things that people appreciated about the building are all being maintained and restored. Meanwhile, we're trying to integrate ductwork, pipes, all the things you'd expect that a housing unit would have.
You know, they've said they're going to have a very efficient heating ventilating system.
Yes.
Does that include heat pumps?
It does, and also insulating the outside wall. So there's the tension between preservation, where we're told don't take any of those surfaces off, and the need to actually insulate the building properly.
Yeah.
So the compromise was we can take the finishes off, insulate, and then put them back on. And the units with the building has very thick brick walls. So there's not that much heat loss between the outside wall. Yet we still needed to be insulated well.
Is it going to be a ground source heat pump or an air source?
It's air. Yeah.
Air source?
Yes.
Then you got to have a gas or some other fuel backup.
We have there's a coil for the backup, but we have typically domestic hot water to these units is provided with gas still.
Yeah.
But it's basically very little gas being brought into the building now.
Okay, because I went through this exercise on my house to convert it to a heat pump, and the first thing they told me is, "Oh, you got gas already, so that's good." And the implications are that if you get a very cold day, you got to crank up the gas-fired boiler to maintain some semblance of comfort in the house. Yeah. So.
Yeah, recent technology has improved that. I've recently installed a heat pump at a property, and it does work at the lower temperatures now to some degree. But you have to kind of let it run. You can't. There's not a rapid recovery to the system.
Yeah.
So you got to keep it going basically.
Yeah. So we're going to end up with I think 85 units for seniors.
Yes.
What are they going to be like? You got a classroom. I guess the classrooms were designed for like 50 kids way back when.
Yeah, they probably were.
Yeah. So you got a fairly large classroom by today's standards anyway.
Yeah.
How do you subdivide one of these things, and what do you end up with? Two-bedroom apartments or single bedroom or what?
Yeah. Well, they're basically one-bedroom apartments.
Okay.
They're a little larger than a building from scratch would do for a senior unit, but not that much larger. And the classrooms themselves lend themselves really well to a dwelling unit. You get two large windows in the living, eating, kitchen area, and then one good-sized window in the bedroom area. Mm-hmm. Part of the historic preservation is you really can't slice up the building. Like sausage, you kind of have to respect the form and the layout of the building. The classrooms were a little bit different in size, each one, and if you know the building is a pentagon shape, so there's some outside corners that made for some interesting units.
Yeah.
Most of the units are one bedroom. There are some studio units in the building as well. So the basic building that folks know, the big pentagon, is essentially all the senior units, and again with that auditorium in the middle.
Mm-hmm. And where do the artists fit into this thing?
Well, good question. There are 6 artist studios. They're basically artists' homes where they can do their work. And those ended up in the old locker room wings, so 3 on each side. Mm-hmm. The nice thing about those is they have exterior access, so for folks bringing in some of the larger things they might have to bring in as artists. It also, part of the program was, to the extent we can, separate the artists community a bit from the senior community, mm-hmm. so that there's, to the extent that the senior community might sometimes feel a bit vulnerable, there's some separation there. So the 2 wings really worked out well. I don't know if you remember the locker rooms, the boys and girls locker rooms are a little bit worn, but they're able to be restored nicely. One of those artist studios is a handicapped accessible unit as well. Yeah.
So when you say artists, is it limited to just painting, or are they? Can you get somebody in there who's doing a huge sculpture or something like that? Or
yeah, I mean, God knows we don't want to discuss how you define what an artist is exactly.
Yeah, that gets to be very flaky now.
But I think that the marketing will be targeted toward an artist, whether it's photographer, painter, I suspect that if you have welding or anything that's more of a toxic kind of off gas or something, that you would not have it rented to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've got a building. It's got 6 units for the artistic side on 2 different wings, so they're spread around. 85 other for the seniors.
Yes.
What other amenities do you have for the seniors? Is there some sort of medical or... Because I start to think of something like a Brooksby Village where they have gradations in what kind of services you can get from just renting a condo or buying a condo to assisted living.
Right.
Does any of this stuff get factored into it?
It does to some extent. It's not a pure assisted. It's not an assisted living facility. These are individual apartment units.
Yeah.
But the model has a resident service coordinator that helps the folks find the kind of services they need and helps arrange for things like getting to the doctors and so forth. Of course, it's great that this is right around the corner from the hospital. The building itself, the old gymnasium, will feature a community room with the big high ceilings. There's a fitness room. There's a yoga studio. The old shop, is actually going to be recreated as a shop for folks to come and use the shop.
Oh, yeah.
So there's those kinds of amenities for folks to use, as well as some outdoor amenities. There's some victory garden space, dog walking space. Part of the sustainability piece is there's a bicycle room provided, and folks will be encouraged to take their bike. So those are the kinds of amenities that are included for the community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we get to the other big issue is the big auditorium. It's the biggest one in town. It's the best one in town, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
What's going to happen to that?
It's being preserved, and the design allowed for folks who are doing the presentations to come in discreetly from the back and in a secure way from the rest of the building. And then the front lobby, of course, is all maintained as access to that auditorium. And it's right now what will be looked for is somebody to operate that theater. It is a very cool building. I brought a couple photos, historic photos with me of the old school we found, which is really helpful in the restoration. And maybe you can, the second one, I think, the next one after this. So this is the original rendering of the high school back from 100 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Which looks exactly...
It still looks like that today.
Yeah, and in front of it is what we call what they called the turf bowl, which is that big lawn out front.
Yeah.
The city's retaining ownership of that, and we're providing it as a little bit of a parklet in front of the building. And there'll be a drop off in front of that for folks to pick up their Uber or to get picked up and dropped off.
Yeah.
But the next one is the back of the building, quite majestic. The big boiler room chimney, which I think you've seen, is still standing, and those ventilators on each side are there. And then the foreground here is the gym and those wings that that'll form the community space and the artist's space.
That's where the artist will be, yeah.
Really beautiful photograph. And when it came to the historic preservation, these are really valuable. The building hadn't changed that much over time, but there are some changes and you want to go back to bring it back to what it was. Maybe the next one has the audit. So this is the entry, the beautiful entry hallway. Yeah, just absolutely. The city fathers and mothers back then really dug in, and they've invested heavily in this building, which is why 100 years later it's still standing strongly. The wear and tear, considering 100 years worth of it, isn't really that bad. It's not really that bad. So a lot of this was here, and will be restored. When we're done, it will look more like this than maybe it does now.
Yeah.
But the next one, I think, might be the auditorium.
Yeah.
So that's this beautiful auditorium. Those big, deep coffered ceilings look like Symphony Hall in Boston, if you've been. And Symphony Hall was built in 1900, so predated this. So, and the architects, Aiden and Parker, who did the Briscoe, no doubt knew about this.
Yeah.
The Symphony Hall, rather, and used that same model where you have the long span, you have the deep structural members, so it almost allows you to put these coffers those ceiling coffers in, which they did here, that you see at Symphony Hall. Really, really neat. And that, as you see it, is pretty much what you will see when we get the project finished.
You're going to reupholster the seating?
Eventually, I was there recently. They had taken all of the broken pieces apart and had stacked them in a room and they will eventually be refurbished.
So you're going to refurbish the existing seating then?
Yeah, I think that
That's part of this maintaining the character of the building.
It is. We need to find out who's going to take over the operation of it and see exactly what their needs are. But ultimately, it would be ideally it would be open for full use. You can imagine the challenges we had with acoustics, thinking about something happening in the middle. This thing is literally in the middle of the building, surrounded by
classrooms all around.
Right, classrooms now, senior citizen units. So we had. The team included an acoustical consultant who looked at that issue, looked at issues like the train going by and how to reduce the impact of the train passing, and even apartment to apartment or apartment to hallway construction was analyzed for maximized privacy.
That was a big issue way back when of the acoustics.
Yeah, it always is.
Yeah.
So I think that those are the interesting photos we were able to work with as we put the history together. And the gymnasium. So this is what the community. A lot of this will be the community center with those big, beautiful trusses added.
So you're going to leave that as a single story. You're not going to divide it up into.
That's correct. I think we raised the floor some because of some handicap accessibility issues, because the entire building is accessible. So if you have a visitor come who has some mobility issues, they can come and use all of the facilities. They can visit all of the units and that kind of thing. We had a really good historic consultant work with us through Mass Historic Commission filings. Took a while to, you got to go through to get the project approved by them for tax credits.
Yeah. Well, the other issue you get into is it's a multi-story building, so I think there was one or two elevators already that had been retrofitted into the building somewhere along the line. And how many are you going to end up with now?
Yeah, there was one that is almost used as a utility elevator. It was out in the back area, and two are being added. Two new ones being added that are adequate size. Now they need to be large enough for a stretcher. And those kinds of things, and the smaller one that they had put in will still be used, but it's more of a utility elevator. I think the real passenger elevator will be elevators.
So you're going to have two real passenger elevators.
Yeah, right off the lobby as you come in.
Okay, up front. Yeah. Okay. Good. So, how much is this all going to cost?
I actually don't know the exact number. It's
ballpark.
Well, I think it's got to be in the $30-something million range.
Yeah.
There is Andrew DeFranza at Harborlight Community Partners, I think, who's working with Beacon Communities, put together a financing package, including the tax credits, and if you went to the groundbreaking, it seems like an infinite amount of lenders that work in programs that work through to make this possible. And Keith Construction is the builder. They were with us from day one, and they do these kinds of projects. Have a lot of experience in them, and they gave us a lot of advice along the way to steer the project into a budget that would work. Because that's part of
grand ideas are great if you can't, but if you can't afford them, so it doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly. The good news is because the structure was sound, and we worked with it rather than against it in terms of the layouts. That part's pretty easy. But the mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems, and all of that, the sustainability piece.
That's got to be brought up to code.
Yeah, comes to play.
And ADA gets into the game too for accessibility.
Quite a lot, including on the site. So we have a landscape architect and a civil engineer that we worked hand in hand with. There's 234 parking spaces for the 91 units, so there's ample parking. The thinking is that when the auditorium is going, full speed, we'll have some of the parking across the way, but we also needed to provide some on site. The site is being completely landscaped,
Yeah.
probably 100 trees. The back lot, the open park, I remember my kids played soccer on, the city will maintain, but that'll have, a good grass surface. It was nice. The senior outdoor area overlooks that, so there can be a nice intergenerational, hopefully, interface there as well.
Explain that again. There's like two areas?
Well, there's the I'll call it the soccer field out back.
Yeah.
And we placed the senior outdoor area directly adjacent. So the dog park, an outdoor patio sitting area, the Victory Gardens are all co-joining that. So
So the
seniors,
soccer field is going to stay there, and there's still going to be space for the seniors for different activities.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, out barbecue, just sitting out in the sun reading, all those kinds of things can happen. The gardening piece, but to be able to see the interface hopefully with the community that's out using
Yeah,
the
I
park
watched
and
the
so
kids play
forth.
soccer, yeah.
That kind of thing, sure.
Yeah. Oh, that's
Yeah.
good. Yeah. And the other thing that surprised me is Beacon communities.
Yes.
Never heard of them before. How do they get into the game? Andrew the Fencer and
Sure.
Homelighter, that's well known around town. Because,
Yeah.
and I've had discussions with him before in different
Yes.
projects. In fact, one of your favorite exercises is that one just up the hill from here, the Anchor Point.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm pretty familiar with
Yeah.
what they're doing. But Beacon seems to be a new name on the.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would walk over hot coals for Andrew. He is just what the world needs. We've
Need
done a
more
lot
of
of
him,
work
yeah.
with them. Not always being well received, trying to build affordable housing in our communities. Beacon is a corporate version, a larger version of them. They're based in Boston. They do hundreds, maybe thousands of these kinds of projects, a year. So they brought a lot of expertise. A lot of the members of our team that we used were brought to us by them. Keith Construction is something that they used. It was a fantastic team. So we benefited from their deep expertise. We benefited from Andrew's local expertise, our own. My wife was involved in the approval process as an attorney. So it was a great combination of really good local, knowledgeable people, and some outside folks who had done a fair bit more of this work, advising us, and worked out absolutely fantastic. Yeah.
So I guess it comes down to that once you get into some of these big projects, especially the restoration kind where you get all the experts telling you how to do it,
Yeah.
it really takes somebody with a lot of experience to guide you through the path.
Well, yeah. I mean, it takes a village to build a village. You might say.
Yeah.
There is certainly, we have code consultants, acoustical consultants, landscape architects, structural consultants, civil engineers. It's the whole team all coming
this
together.
This is a big deal. It's a lot of different things that get dragged into it because you're starting with something that's got to be restored and replace. You can't just replace stuff through willy-nilly. I can imagine the trauma you're going through trying to snake in all the cables and all the ductwork into an existing building.
Yeah.
And the requirement that you mentioned early on of got to maintain the surfaces and restore them.
Right. Right.
It's not even something you just can't tear the old stuff off and put something up that looked almost like it.
No, we have a local architect, Krista Broyles, who works with us. She's in the building right now, and there's a weekly meeting, and they walk around, and they, as things get uncovered, and they're trying to fit things. She's out there working hard with the team to get it all to fit.
She's got the big
work.
shoehorn.
She's got the big shoe. That's a good way to put it. She's got the big shoehorn.
Yeah.
And that's what it takes. That's what it takes. We discovered that what was holding up the proscenium of the stage was a large beam that comes flying into the corner of a unit. So all of a sudden, you've got to figure out how do you make that unit really work. Those kinds of things show up on the radar. But generally, the plans that we got from the 1920s were what that was built, weren't changed much. We're able to just kind of work with those and keep it rolling.
Yeah. So you said it's about a 2-year project?
Yeah, it's funny that it will parallel almost 100 years.
The original construction.
Will have started essentially in the very beginning of 2023, and 20 months, I think, is what's projected. Generally some supply chain stuff and so forth. It might take a little longer, but the contractor really is excellent. They got it all. They have a schedule they're following pretty clearly. We're getting shop drawings and submittals all the time that we turn over. Our engineers look at and sign off on and keep the thing moving. So it should 20 months seems like a pretty reasonable time frame. So
that's
fall
good.
of 2025, I guess.
That's when they start loading people into it.
Hope so.
Yeah.
There's a huge need for it. I would say that housing is critically. We got to build a lot of housing. We're traveling over the state and even out of the state trying to spread the gospel of the need for housing because it's real. There were 600 applicants for 38 units at Anchor Point.
Yeah.
I imagine you're going to have a similar kind of proportion here. The need is that desperate.
They're going to run a lottery for.
Yeah, I think there's 70% local participation in that, meaning that folks from I think Beverly, Salem, Peabody, 70% of the units can be set aside for them. For those folks. There's a lottery. I think I saw some advertisements in the paper about getting in on a lottery. And I think 25% of the units are deeply affordable. That's like 30% of your income goes to it. And then the rest are 60% AMI affordable, which is still reasonable, pretty reasonable rent. The artist studios are market rate unit. Yeah.
Because that's the other issue that keeps coming up. It's nice to have these spaces, but if you can't afford them.
Sure.
And this is one of the things that keeps popping up, and I've mentioned it several times, is that by the state definition of affordable housing, you got to be pretty well off.
Right.
And I like the phrase Andrew keeps using, housing that is affordable. Mm-hmm. And the implications there is you got a certain income, and like you mentioned, the 30% is the magic number.
Yeah. Yes.
And you can't get market rate buildings to get into the 30% category.
Right. Right.
And one of the ones I keep using on the discussions is when I bought my house. Back then, the rule of the game was you never bought a house more than 1 year's salary.
Yeah, that doesn't happen anymore.
And you try to think about how you can do something like that now, and it just can't happen. I mean, the economy has changed dramatically.
It has.
So that some sort of accommodations have to be made, and it's got to be state, city, some sort of municipality has got to step in and say, hey, we're going to build this building and we're going to rent it at something other than market rate, because the people that are in need of it aren't market rate.
No, we have an office on the Cape, and you can imagine how the struggle they have with where do their teachers, firefighters, and police and and servers, all those folks live. They can't all live, off the island. They need to come down there, and so that's worse there, I think, but still.
Yeah, it's the same problem we have here in Beverly. That how do you get it? Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching this evening. And as usual, at the end of the credits is my email address. So if you have some comments or questions, send me an email. And if you want to appear and express your opinion, we'll make room for you at the table. And thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.